Hey there, everyone. It's Jody Sutter of the Sutter Company. It's Just Ask Jody live here, live on LinkedIn Live. Hope everyone is good today. I'm just going to apologize for those who maybe are watching this on video because they wanted to be here live. Last week, we had a series of extenuating circumstances that just had us, unfortunately, need to give us a reason to postpone to this week. So if you can't join us here live, hopefully you'll be listening to us on the recording. And if you are here live, I want to encourage you to add your questions to the chat. If you've got questions or comments, I've got my team member, Megan, who's also monitoring the chat. So if I don't see it, Megan will. So today we're going to be talking about the difference between big agency business development techniques and small agency business development techniques. So most of my clients are agencies that are on the smaller side, between 5 and 55 people. And there are a lot of characteristics that describe small agency business development. A lot of it has to do with the leadership team wearing a lot of hats around business development and focusing on being able to use your time wisely and strategically. It's a little bit also all hands on deck. I think from my experience, because I have worked with both very large agencies and smaller agencies, but working with big agencies, big global agencies, it's almost more like you do have a little bit more planning. It's still scrambling, but there are some key differences. And I think that we can learn a lot. Small agencies especially can learn a lot from how big agencies handle new business pitches. So my guest today is an old friend of mine, colleague, Adam Levine, and he's like me, a career business development expert, career business development professional. He has worked with some major agencies, names you'd know like McKinney, Deutsch, Draft FCB. Most recently, he is coming off a fractional CMO, a gig at Zimmerman. So a lot of big names, and he's seen a lot of different types of situations, and is probably one of the biggest experts on big agency new business pitching. So we're going to welcome onto the show right now. Hey, Adam.
Hey, Jody. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, and thank
You're
you for inviting me to be part of your Ask Jody live series.
You're very welcome. It's so nice to have you here. This is one of I always feel like it's a little bit like a party, inviting my friends on to chat, to talk shop.
Well, I was dancing to the free music, so I'm ready for the party.
That is awesome. All right. So, Adam, you've worked mostly with big agencies, but you've worked with some small agencies too, yeah?
Indeed, yes.
I'm going to start, I guess the first question I would love to chat with you about is, what do you see as the differences between how smaller agencies manage big business development versus big agencies? And what do you think are some key lessons that might be able to be gleaned?
Clearly, I think that the obvious one is resources.
Yeah.
Big agencies, and clearly the trend is moving away from it. But big agencies have a dedicated department. They have dedicated subscriptions that always help us in terms of background or looking up clients and all those little tools. But technology and AI is certainly helping smaller agencies, and I think that's the big difference. That a lot of times at smaller agencies, there's really not one person responsible. It's sometimes a shared responsibility.
Yeah.
And we all know what happens sometimes when it's a shared responsibility. There's almost no one driving or steering. And I think that's one of the key differences is someone has to have accountability and responsibility.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things I've also found is, yeah, you're right. Probably the biggest difference is dedicated business development team versus, as you said, shared responsibility. But also what's interesting, sometimes I find that the advantages that small agencies have is, while it is a shared responsibility, because the CEO or the owner or founder and or his or her management team are a little bit more involved, sometimes there's also a bit more of a sense of mission. They are sometimes more bought into the process as well as the outcome. That may just be my experience. I'm just hearing
Are you saying larger agencies or smaller agencies?
No, smaller agencies. I find sometimes with a larger agency, or when an agency gets to the point where they're like, we can hire a business development team, then it's like, here, hand over responsibility.
I think that's fascinating and interesting. And I think it also speaks to entrepreneurship. I think most of larger agencies at this point, most of them are holding companies.
Yes.
Most of them, except where I am recently, aren't led by a founder. So that kind of, this is my bread and butter. This is
Yeah.
my existence. This is my agency, that comes from having a small agency mentality, makes you want to figure out things a little bit more and,
Yeah.
kind of, I don't want to say rolling up the sleeves, but that sense and pride of ownership and entrepreneurship, that my
Right.
success is contingent on no one but me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's also why when I work with the agencies that I do, I'll always say that whether they want to hear this or not, the CEO is the best business development resource that a small agency has. Not necessarily the only one, but the best one, because they are so driven, because they've already had to figure out, either through natural business development talents or just through sheer force of will, they have to figure out how to fill their pipeline, because they have to make payroll, they have to keep people employed. Yeah, it's a different
But
kind of
also,
challenge.
there's something, one of the better consultants, Lisa Qualitano, if you don't know her, you should. She will say this in the first thing that she says to anyone: we're in a relationship business. And
Mhm.
that one-on-one personal relationship with an owner, founder,
Yeah.
CEO is invaluable. And most new business does come from relationships. I know, myself included, everyone's like, "Ooh, what's the secret of new business?" And there is no secret.
Sorry.
There's a right. Sorry, everyone. Everyone leaves the chat now.
Yeah.
But there is no secret. There's
Yeah.
a zillion different things that need to be moving on all cylinders. But the question is, the relationship piece and building those relationships, and again, going back to that CEO, owner, founder, those
Yeah.
relationships are invaluable.
So first of all, we've got two comments, and now I really do feel like it's a little like lunchtime party, like reunion, because we have our friend Lisa Spielman, who's also a business development veteran who now works for Convergence, as well as Matt Kassendorf, who, by the way, people, is going to be my guest next month. Matt Kassendorf of the 4As. And so Matt just put a comment saying that in many ways, regardless of size, an agency has to have an embedded culture of growth. And I say,
1,000%.
yeah,
1,000%. And I've
yeah,
said this, and I will say it: at a big agency, a small agency, a mid-sized agency, new business is everyone's business.
yeah,
And what that means, it may not necessarily mean you like to pitch or you like to hunt, but there's a many ways that everyone can help new business. First off, do you know the elevator pitch,
yeah,
right? And when you're sitting next to someone on a plane, train, automobile, and someone says, "What do you do?" Do you know how to crystallize what your agency is and the value? Because anywhere is an opportunity to pitch. Or if you don't like to pitch, you're going to cover for the guy, especially in smaller agencies, who is
yeah.
pitching and helping out and saying, "Well, I'm not going to be forward facing on this pitch, but I am going to pick up the slack of my coworker who loves to new business." So that embedded culture of growth is 1,000% spot on. New business is everyone's business.
Okay, so I love that for a number of reasons. But while I love how you answered that, or expounded on that, I will also confess that I really dislike that phrase. New business is everyone's business. And and the reason, it was funny, this just came up in another talk that I did. The reason I don't like it is I think it can be misinterpreted to mean that new business, that anyone who touches new business has to be proficient at all aspects of new business. And it's this idea of you being an account manager, an account director, that, well, it's your business too. So you have to know how to go out there and find the beast and kill it and bring it home. And I think that freaks people out. And then people just don't do it. So I think you're right. Yes, understanding, as the owner or as the top leader, understand where people fit within their strengths. So they've got,
But Jody, I'm going to
yeah,
push back, because Jody
yeah.
and I do this often. We push back on one another. I'll
We
give an
don't always
example where new
agree.
business is everyone's business. So I was at
Mm,
I'm sure people can figure out, a very large agency whose background was direct response. And we were pitching
mm,
the government,
mhm,
the Food and Drug Council for the new pyramid. So we sent an email to the whole network
yeah,
and the subject was, "Do you eat?" Right? And we needed people to take 5 minutes out of their time and fill out a survey, because we're going to use that survey data in part of our RFI or RFP.
yeah,
And we had a single digit response rate. So when I say new business is everyone's business, doesn't mean you have to be on the
Right.
pitch, doesn't mean that you have to be working on the weekends. But when an email comes out for something that's important,
Wow.
that's a 5-minute thing, and at a direct response agency, shame on us. And I use
Wow.
that in a town hall.
Yeah. Wow. So I guess this probably goes back to culture. I'm kind of going to answer my own question, which is, did that agency not have a strong new business culture? Is that what was missing?
No, because it was focused on, and I think this is what, especially when you get into how are people compensated? Are you compensated on how your business does or how the agency does? And
Yeah.
when you have people nose down only in the results of their own business versus a vested interest in how the whole agency is doing,
Yeah.
then you're setting up individual fiefdoms as opposed to everyone caring and concerning about the greater good and the greater agency.
Yeah.
That comes down to like sharing numbers. And if you only see the numbers on your business, some
Yeah.
companies don't want anyone knowing how the business is doing. Some people are incredibly transparent in terms of where the agency is in terms of goals. So
Yeah.
again, it goes down to business model and how people are compensated, remunerated, not just on their business, but on the agency as a whole.
Yeah. That's interesting. I also like that because I think sometimes agencies, well, I think it's a mistake. Interesting to know what you think. The giving people bonuses for either bringing in leads or participating. I actually think I've seen that backfire more often than not because people are like, look, I've got my salary and the fear or the awkwardness, the discomfort around business development is too great. It's not worth the $2,500 or whatever they're going to get. But if everyone's compensation is tied to that benchmark, that's a much better way to do it.
Look, I was working with a smaller agency last year who had an amazing program in terms of compensating, and they actually turned it into a competition, compensating staff on getting a lead. And it was public, everyone was involved. It was very interesting to see they did it right. I would say
Yeah.
on larger agencies, it is harder because people are already, working, 8, 10, 12 hours a day, unfortunately, on their existing business. So the question is, I'm a believer in it, but I'm also a believer in, like the best source of new business is existing business.
Yeah.
So how do you compensate for that as well and not leave that off the table?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I've already like have a list of questions that I'm already thinking like I'm not going to get to them all. I want to go back to culture and ask
Sure.
you. It'd be interesting to know what in the past what you've either been able to change when you've come to an agency with a poor new business culture and or what you've been able to leverage in an agency with a great new business culture and maybe a little bit of the difference between the two.
So I just saw a quick question from Lisa
Yeah.
Spielman saying, were they compensated for just a lead or a conversion? It's both, actually.
Hmm.
So I've set up structures where it's not just the lead, Lisa, it's actually to get a meeting. And also it's based on a pre-subscribed, here's the criteria, here's the category we're open in, here's the things we're trying to do, here's the threshold in terms of, or the floor for revenue. Because if someone has hey, my parents own the bodega down the corner, and
Right.
they need some help. Well, I don't know if that's going to move the needle in terms of work or in terms of revenue. So it's important to know what's an assignment worth and what do you get for an assignment, for a meeting, and what do you get for a conversion, actually. So I'm sorry, I just wanted to address that.
Yeah, that's great. Great question and great answer. Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, so new business culture. How
So I think
how can we move the needle? And
I
again, for
think
small and large.
so I think what's funny a lot of times is we're in a communication business, and sometimes we don't communicate new business. And what I mean by that is I've worked at a lot of large agencies, and first and foremost, a lot of people, especially these days, they don't know how the agency makes money, right? They don't
Yeah.
know how the agency makes money. They don't know how we staff. They don't know how we actually get new business. So
Mhm.
in some town halls, what I've actually done is almost a new business 101. Like, where does an agency, and I find it incredibly helpful. And I've had people come up and thank me to say they never knew. So
Yeah.
really almost a one-on-one in terms of, because
Mm.
we're so close to it. We know what an RFI stands for, what an RFP stands for, an SOW, all of
Yeah.
those things. Some people have no idea.
Yeah.
So to stand in front and let the whole agency know, here's the different ways in which the agency is going to get new business. These are consultants. These are procurement. These are relationships. This is pounding the pavement and cold calling. Another topic Jody and I disagree on. We can get to that in a second. But I think communication and letting people understand how the agency grows new business and how the agency functions and operates, and the importance of a dedicated new business person or dedicated new business team, and how and why and what we do, whether it's the marketing or a public email saying fill out this survey, the importance of every piece of it. So I think number one, it starts with communication. And I see, Matt commented a culture of growth. I think it's important for people, again, understanding the business that you're in or we're in, and how the agency grows and makes money.
I think also that could really tie into things like the timeline, the fact that pitches can often this I think I see in small and big, from the moment a client expresses interest to the moment you close can be quite a long buying cycle. And just what's at stake, the amount of competition that an agency typically faces. And I wonder also if you start to build that culture, can you also add in or increase the layer of proactive efforts? So, there's the reactive stuff. Here's what we're going to pitch because we were invited, versus the proactive. We really want to go hard into this category. What is our strategy and how are we going to implement it?
I think so. You use the magic word strategy.
Yeah.
I've worked with many different agencies who don't have a strategy. And so first and foremost, what is the new business strategy? And making sure that the agency, and whether it's partners or co-founders, that everyone's aligned that this is our new business strategy.
Yeah.
And they could change from year to year, but starting with that first and foremost. And the other thing, and Jody, you and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, is I think Socrates said it, know thyself. Right. So know what you're good at, right? Know what your swim lane is. And when I say swim lane, it doesn't mean you think you should come out, you can't come out of your swim lane. But that elevator pitch, I think, is so crucial to know exactly what the agency stands for. So if someone asks you, or you need to tell someone, what do you stand for? What do you do, to be able to have that everyone is singing from the same framework?
Yeah. How many times have you been in a situation where you've had a great elevator pitch that everyone understood and used?
I
You're
would
not
say
gonna
it's
name names.
exactly. I would say I would say it's the agencies you all know of, right? That if you think about like Deutsch back in the day, if you think about a Zimmerman, it doesn't matter what you think of the agency, but you get a visceral reaction, and and you understand, Droga today, 72 and Sunny, when they were in their prime, everyone knows what these agencies stood for.
Right. And did you find what was the effect on the staff when they had when they were all saying from the same song sheet?
I think what's amazing is you see it show up in emails. You see it show up in the call report. You see it show up in behavior. How do you behave in a meeting? Are we an agency that's going to say, no, we're going to take three more weeks and we're going to make this beautiful, et cetera, versus are you an agency that says, we're in the retail business, you're going to have it tomorrow because we know you care more about your sales results than you do if we retouch that one blemish out. But I see when a culture is clear, when a culture is concise, you don't just see it show up in the work or the press or the CEO's talking points. You see it show up in the day-to-day account executive, and how it gives them a lighthouse in terms of how they're supposed to behave with clients.
Yeah, it illuminates their mission. Now they're like, yeah, I'm on board. And I think a lot of it has to do with clarity, because there are a lot of elevator pitches that are not clear. And so it's difficult to memorize, difficult to repeat, difficult to feel good about, because it's like, this is sort of fluffy. But when it's really clear and it's very client focused, that I also think that can make a big difference when you are asking people who are not trained business development people, like an account manager, to help grow their business or introduce the agency to others. When it's such a simple tool, and when it's easy to use, they're more likely to use it. I think we don't like sales when we don't believe in the product that we're selling, or we're not equipped with the right language to sell the product that we're selling or the service.
100%.
Yeah. when we do, it just becomes when we are equipped with it, it just becomes a conversation. I'm going to switch gears for a minute. Let's talk. You had mentioned earlier consultants. A lot of agencies, the small agencies I talk to, are like, "Oh, we got to get ourselves exposed to consultants." Um, what, yeah, what are your thoughts on the importance of a relationship with a search consultant if you're a smaller agency?
Look, at some point, everyone's getting smaller and smaller scopes and smaller projects. That does mean the consultants as well. More of their work is also moving to procurement. So just a quick aside, don't forget procurement,
Yeah,
ProcureCon, any of those kind of things where you can show up big relationships with procurement, which sounds like an oxymoron. But look, I think
Hmm.
the consultants are, they're not going away. I think everyone's talking about, and every year the article comes back up, ditch the pitch. But consultants are still a tried and true part of our business, and I think establishing relationships where you can is incredibly helpful. I think
Yeah,
just to be cognizant that I don't know the current number of agencies in the country, but it's in the thousands. Then imagine they're getting thousands of emails every day, which they
yeah,
are. So I
yeah,
think being strategic and getting on the radar in a strategic way and finding ones that, let's say you see the kind of pitches that they're leading and running from the press, is to focus on them. I also know they don't want to hear from us every day.
yeah,
Find the right cadence, and oftentimes I tell folks I'm working with, quarterly is
yeah,
more than enough in a kind of newsletter format, but they
yeah,
only want to hear major news, major wins, major losses, major talent retention, or if you acquired someone, or if there's a new campaign that's going gangbusters.
yeah.
Um, and they're going to places like Mirren, which now I think is moving beyond New York and having
That's Mirror
conferences
Business
throughout the
Development
country.
Conference for those who aren't familiar with that.
The
Yeah.
the Mirren development is an amazing way to meet your colleagues at other agencies, and sometimes a pitch might not be right for them. Also, I would say generally anywhere about a half dozen consultants do go, and there's
Yeah.
no better way than breaking bread and
Yeah.
meeting them in person and following up. But just be
Yeah.
cautious that they're not a be all and end all. They generally get
Yeah.
larger pitches. Some of them are pay for play, which we all kind of
Don't
are not
love.
so sure
Yeah.
about. Right, exactly. And Lisa just dropped in the chat, if you do Google it the right way, do Foray's consultant new business consultants list, you get a link. I think it might be password protected if you go through the Foray's main page, so there's a little trick.
I'm not, and again, if
But
Matt's still here, he can comment, but I don't think it is because I think
oh,
I
okay.
went there. I also keep my own list, but it's seriously cross-referenced with the forays. And I think I'm on there too. So thank you, forays. but, but yeah, so there's new business consultants as well as search consultants. I think you bring up great points. It's the gratuitous, like we're here, or like the misguided notion that persistence will win the day. Um, these guys are just like your prospects. They're really busy, but when you can solve a problem that is a persistent problem for them, they want to talk to you. So
Again, the one thing I would just add, Jody, is if you've never worked with a consultant or if you haven't reached out to them, I think it's important to not just give them lots of words, but give them, here are the category, here's what we specialize in, here's our elevator speech,
yeah,
here's the categories that we are open in.
yeah.
Here's, and it's important for, so use that time and that email to get as much succinct information across as possible.
Make it easier to do their job well. That's
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and actually, also the thing just to reinforce the what you said earlier about wins and losses, and everyone, Matt has put the link in the comments for the agency search consultants list, and maybe Megan, if you have a chance to copy that and throw that into the comments for those who are going to be looking at this later, or we can do that. Lisa also mentioned consultants like Convergence who can help too. But I was going to, oh yeah, the losses. So this was also like a big years ago when I was running this dev teams. It was like sort of the big balloon, like idea bubble that appeared. The fact that they want to know, the fact that there's actually an opportunity to say we lost a piece of business, which means we now have this. We have this talent and knowledge that is current, and we're ready to give this to someone else in the category.
And by the way, that works because there's a medium-sized agency whose business for a bank was put in review and actually had a number of consultants just from that press leak reach out to them and say, hold on, we're going to have a few RFPs for you. So don't get rid of your team yet.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. You know, I always talk about how the risk that's involved with hiring an agency, and the more agencies and more that we can understand that and feel some empathy around how that client has to manage the risk. And one of the risks is, you know, basically it comes down to time and money, and time is money. But the less they have to onboard an agency that does not have experience in their category, then the higher the risk. And so that's, yes, if you can show like, look, we're highly creative and we've got a great team and all the things that agencies say, plus we've got this intellectual property that can be put to use right away. Yeah.
Yeah, and also I mentioned something quickly. The press had actually had something. Don't forget press relationships. And I think a lot of times small agencies don't feel like they can fit or play or have a relationship with the press. Again, another invaluable tool.
Yeah.
Go to the small agencies. The Ad Age Small Agency Conference. Befriend those press people. Hit them up on LinkedIn. They'll all accept if they see your founder. It doesn't mean you inundate them, but that's another relationship that can be and should be invaluable.
Yeah, I want to bring up that, but also, Lisa, I will definitely publish the link to the Pitcher Pass checklist for sure, which helps agencies if they don't already have a scorecard about whether to pursue new business opportunity. It's a great start. Yeah, but going back to your thought on a relationship with the press, it's really like, yeah, you should include that as part of your prospecting program. Maybe not every agency, but most agency totally makes sense. Not only will they be in a position to help you at times, but you are also in a position to help them. So they need information. And if you can provide off the record comments, then they're more likely to take your call when you need a little bit of press coverage or you need to get their advice. So definitely.
Exactly. And it also goes back to if you specialize in something and right now I'm working, with an agency that specializes in retail.
Yeah.
If you specialize in something, and how can you become a go-to if there's a quote or comment needed on AI, on Web3, on retail, or what you do, become the expert in that, and definitely play the press game, which to me is not really part of the new business process, but it's also part of the marketing process, which to me goes hand in hand with sales and marketing.
Absolutely. Like I said, I've got a long list of questions and we're already at the bottom of the hour. Pardon me. But if it's okay, I'd love to just talk to you a little bit about a couple of other things. Can you tell me, what do you think? And this is kind of an open-ended question, so I apologize in advance. What do marketers want from agencies, large and small, these days? What are their top concerns?
I think especially in an economy like we've had, I think the top concerns right now is ROI. It's ROAS, it's ROI, it's results. It's interesting, having had started my own shop a number of years ago and talking with a client about case studies. She, would push and push and said the only thing CMOs care about in the case studies are your results. So I think, but again, it goes back to what you do and what you believe in, and how you position yourself. But results is, and also, as we all know, everyone wants more for less these days, and that's a shame. The devaluation of the work, the devaluation of the creative product. But again, the renewed focus, the laser-like focus on is this work, is this media plan, is this design going to move my business ahead?
Yeah. I think they do want results, and I think they do want more for less. I feel like more for less is not a new thing.
No.
But I also, and maybe this is just me being overly optimistic and sanguine, but I also believe that if you can position yourself to solve a particular problem and you have a way of translating that into value, then I think the reason that clients want to pay less for more is because they feel like agencies have become commoditized. So yeah, if I'm buying laundry detergent, I'm going to buy Tide when it's on sale, right? It's a commodity, but and that's, I think we've sort of shot ourselves in the foot there, because a lot of agencies are not as good at leading with their value and how they make a difference. And I think a lot of it is, yeah.
And what
Right.
I've said often, and what I say to a lot of times to procurement, who benchmarks costs, is, look, a VW Bug can get you there the
Yeah.
same way a Mercedes can get you there, but
Yeah.
they're going to do it in very different ways. So, do you want to spend for a VW old Bug, or do you want a new Mercedes? Because
Yeah.
we all try.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I just want to also note Lisa's comment, because this is it's sort of it's a sort of a spur on our conversation here. But why do many agencies neglect to provide a biz dev person's email on their website? Amen. And it's just, and one of the answers might be, especially if you're one of the agencies that I work with, it might be like, well, we don't have a biz dev person. But the other thing that Lisa says here, many just cite info at, and that is super impersonal. Always leave a name, even if you don't have a dedicated new business person. In fact, even better to leave the CEO, president, founder, like person who's ultimately in charge.
Yeah, I think that it's a little bit of a slippery slope, and
Mm.
I know we're over time, but quickly, I think some people, because they're steel people that are new business people and don't look at
Oh, that's
and
interesting. Yeah.
LinkedIn. That's one point.
Mm.
The other is, I can tell you from experience how much spam you end up getting when your name is on a public website. And so I think with the
Yeah.
contact, a lot of times it's vendors, it's production companies.
Yeah.
So
I should have a
if
different
you're
team.
spending for a seasoned and senior new business person and they're spending their time vetting through spam,
Yeah.
that's not how you want them to use their time. But I
Yeah.
do agree with you, especially on a smaller agency where it is more about the founder or the owner.
Yeah.
To have someone's name in there is definitely, again, it shows agency culture and personality.
And I think there are probably strategies around that or tactics around that, like a version of your email address that is only in the website. But then you have to make sure that either you're checking that email account or you've got someone on your team checking that regularly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Um, okay. If it's okay, just one more question for you out of my long, long list. Any thoughts? I would love to end this conversation with some thoughts about how smaller agencies can compete against the big guys based on your experience.
I think it goes back to know thyself. You like know what you're good at, because if
Yeah.
you look at the playing field, there are some amazingly small agencies who are getting great work from Google, great assignments from
Yeah.
Netflix, great assignment from Amazon. So it's not that it can't be, but a lot of times these agencies are super specialized. I think, thinking about Giant Spoon and the work they do for HBO.
Yeah.
Giant Spoon is a nice small size agency, but the work they're doing for, I believe it's HBO or for Stranger Things, I mean, it's award winning and groundbreaking. And if you look at some of the other agencies, it's because they're so specialized. So going back to know thyself and how could you augment their existing list? And again, building that relationship. I think I once saw from the Mirror BizDev conference, 66% of advertisers find their vendors, and they meant agencies,
Yeah.
versus the other way around. So
Yeah.
how do you make it easier to be found when someone's looking for you?
Yeah. I think also in one of the last reports I saw that the number one way is also still asking their friends, their colleagues. But so they rely on the people that they trust to make a recommendation on who they should look at for hiring an agency. But that also means that though there's also partially reliant on the impression that you as an agency are making, the overall impression that you are making, not only on a one-on-one way, but what your website says, what your thought leadership says. And the more that narrative can be cohesive, the stronger it'll be too.
Totally
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah. Um, there's so much we could talk about. I'll have to have you back on again. Thank you for being with me today. Adam, I mentioned that you are finishing up your time at Zimmerman. So, if there are agencies out there who are looking for a fractional CMO, you might want to give Adam a call. You can get to him on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
And
link in with me and let's start a conversation. But I love talking new business. I love talking agencies. I'm very
yeah,
passionate about both.
yeah. So thank you so much for being here, because I do think there's a lot that we can take from big agency biz dev and apply it to small agencies. I really appreciate that.